In this video, I'll be philosophizing on direction concerning always positive and or negative directionality, that one engages certain navigations within what existingly needs certain positive and or negative meaning and affective cues that are salient to one who is holding a distinct goal, needing clarification of that goal for meaningful navigations to hold direction. One otherwise is aimless, be it that one lacks a clear goal and or lacks the existing priors that are relevant and or appropriate to constitute meaningful step-by-step navigations towards X goal and or meaningful navigation, be it that in some cases one may be exploring and or engaging certain mind wanderings in order to establish what the goal should be, as one may desire to engage in a meaningful pursuit, yet not quite hold the self-knowledge and or self-awareness what that pursuit is. And this is mostly related to the unsatisfied and or desire to satisfy the underlying psychological need for meaning in life, as there's meaning within the adventure that allowances for and or disallowances the cultivation of meaningfulness within distinct navigations, be it the allowances are what motivates approach and or the disallowances motivates the appropriate solutions to obstacles to provide meaningful inferences into future-oriented problems that one may build one's proactive coping skills and or problem-solving skills that are meaningful to engage more creative thinking to unknown unknowns and or meaningful similarities that one may more likely probabilistically experientially encounter on one's future-oriented journeys. Direction uniquely allowances for more meaningful cultivations and also disallowances for misdirection and or counterproductive directions, be it that misdirection in some cases may be beneficial and ironically provide allowances within other certain goals, as you may have experientially encountered a detour and or thinking that you are meaningfully pursuing one goal to serendipitously arrive at certain self-knowledge and or self-awareness within what may be to another goal perhaps counterproductive, and yet you may within future-oriented navigations draw from that unique experiential encounter to solve other problems that you were not able to solve prior existing to the more narrow navigations, to hold more unique self-knowledge and or self-awareness within the misdirection, ironically providing allowances, not necessarily always disallowances, yet one may establish more meaningful knowledge with the appropriate and or relevant and or meaningful calibrated thinking in terms of the meaninglessness and or wasted time and or efforts navigating aimlessly, not experiencing meaningfulness within a misdirection, as the meaningfulness itself is a navigational cue that cultivates more navigational wisdom. Not necessarily counterproductive, as it's often the explorations that allow us to experience what we truly often forget to expand our unique self in terms of exploring distinct possible probabilistic opportunities, returning to the same consistent practices and or navigations with fresh eyes, expanding perspective to think more clearly and or increase the processing intracategorical and or intercategorical effectivenesses and or efficiencies meaningfully with more positive, meaningful emotion, fueling an individual's intrinsic motivations to navigate with more directionality the appropriate responses to certain situations. Individuals who tend to be more exploratory are more likely to hold some meaningful, similar experiences that they may recount in terms of having been more within one's mind wanderings, engaging then the subsequent introspections, feeling good, to spend hours navigating, thinking one was conducting X in order to complete a distinct other goal, to then actualize some other goal one had thought previously and or had not even considered the meaningfulness within conducting until one actualizes certain positive, meaningful emotions in relation to the calibrated thinking to engage and or then allowance for and or disallowance the future-oriented navigations to conduct X pursuit one may have desired to conduct prior existing, yet with the distinct navigations brings into the future-oriented navigations some new and or original meaningful self-knowledge and or self-awareness that increases the productivity and or creative thinking within the future-oriented pursuit, reflecting what's going on in the mind-body connections that engage more creative connections with meaningful pathways that have yet not formed, needing the distinct experiential encounters and or the meaningful conducts one thinks is engaging meaningful conducts to engage the intrinsic motivations that satisfy the as a must be good enough and necessarily necessary conditions. Meaningful pathways within mind-body connections connect and or synthesize new and or different and or original pathways of desired meaningful effect, optimizing intracategorical and or intercategorical effectivenesses and or efficiencies that may optimize future-oriented problem solving within what one had previously desired to conduct and or meaningful similarities within the domain-specific desired, not necessarily distinct domain-specific endeavors, meaning that there are meaningful connections as one is experientially encountering certain perceptual component parts and or processes, engaging the experiential learning within the navigations that build direction within one's extensor muscles of the self, whom is the navigator, elaborating the existing priors within certain information pathways. One is walking the trails in the forest, the grassy, wet mildew of spherical bulbs to one's grazing feet truly are never too near and or far away from the individual whom is on the trail to explore X destination on one's journey. With some direction, one may elaborate into certain directions. With more clarity, one allowances for valid and or psychologically true and or meaningful navigations. Not invalid, not untrue, and or not meaningless. Meaning that one allowances navigation and or disallowances navigation in certain directions that build one's competency in terms of the navigational wisdom. One has easier access and or evaluation of knowledge concerning. To not confuse disallowance with invalid and or untrue and or meaningless, meaning that disallowances are cancellations of certain directions that may hold distinct positive and or negative outcomes that should optimize the positives, be it the disallowance is a valid and or psychologically true and or meaningful disallowance, and or compared to the allowances that, be it valid and or psychologically true and or meaningful, increases as well the positive meaningfulness within each positive affect, indicating the appropriate direction of meaningful navigations, with negative affects indicating certain cues for avoidance. Positive, more related to approach, and or maybe associated more with warm, compared to negative, more associated with cold and or avoidance, and or harm and or threat. Hence, avoidance and or certain stress-related responses needing proactive coping and or certain appropriate solutions to problems engaging more creative thinking. Not necessarily psychological distress. And this is something that needs to be clarified, as engaging stress is needed and confronting stress, and in some cases, willfully inducing stress, including physical exercise. Physical exercise willfully induces stress that builds muscle, uniquely to mind-body connections, that you're building the mind's muscles more stronger to tolerate stress, not be intolerant to stress, increasing your tolerance of stress that's meaningful for navigation and or direction, allowancing for more appropriate and or meaningful and or relevant solutions within issues you may experientially encounter on your journeys. Confronting the unknown unknowns as you satisfy certain underlying psychological needs calibrated to your self-preferences. Exploring the most meaningfulness within the existencialismo, uma engajas o navegações dentro umas fenomenológico experiências mais valientemente, em uma direção de umas desejos conectado para umas coração, engajando o desejos de umas jornada. That's all I want to say for this video. Hope you have an awesome one and keep looking at this episode.